Hoo boy, if you like slow motion. And more lens flares than J.J. Abrams in his prime. Have I got the movie for you. This week, Zack Snyder's director's cut of Rebel Moon Part 1 and Part 2. 6 hours of my life. 6. But nothing is a waste of time unless I allow it to be. And I did find some quasi-great things about this massive epic that we can at least learn from. Number 1, a wasted cat. Well, more of a misplaced cat. So Save the Cat is a term coined by Zack Snyder in the early 2000s in his book Save the Cat, the last book on screenwriting you will ever need. So the concept is simple but powerful. The audience needs to root for the main character. So by having the main character save a cat, no matter how bad he or she may be, it automatically bonds them to the audience. It gives them a sense of empathy that we can all connect to and makes us root for them. Now, there are many ways to save the cat. So if we look at Game of Thrones, the first thing we see is Ned Stark cut off somebody's head. But afterwards, he goes to his son and says the famous line,
"You understand why I did it?
John said he was a deserter.
But do you understand why I had to kill him?
Oh, where's the old way?
The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword."
So that gives him this sense of honor that the audience can connect to. So even in Madam Web, they take this very literally. They have a very antisocial character, but she does have this stray cat that she connects with.
Us strays need to stick together. Somebody's hungry.
Side note for anybody who has cats, please don't give them milk. They're actually mostly lactose intolerant, and they may like the way it goes down, but they won't like the way it comes up, and you won't like cleaning it either. So Save the Cat is meant to endear us to the hero, but Zack Snyder puts it in a different place, his prologue. So we can obviously tell the Empire is bad. They're branding people like cattle, they're killing everybody, they march like Imperials, they look like Nazis. But who are the good guys, and why do we care about them other than common human decency? The answer is we don't. We have no emotional connection to these people who are losing their lives. So Zack Snyder tries to use Save the Cat to save this scene, and it works a little bit. One of the girls in danger is carrying this cage with this cute little animal, and while I didn't care anything for the people, I found my heart racing throughout the scene because I wanted this little guy to live for some reason. It's just human psychology, I guess, or maybe I like cats too much, I don't know. But the point is, it invested me in an otherwise bleak and emotionless scene. However, because of its irrelevance to the main characters and the story, it does become a little bit of a cheap trick to manipulate engagement. And also, I'm not one to give parenting advice, but you probably shouldn't give your children an animal that can blow itself up and go nuclear when it gets angry. Shit, if Mittens could do that, I'd be long dead by now. The second thing we can learn from actually this opening scene is how to effectively use a prologue to establish stakes and introduce a villain. Now, a lot of authors like to use the prologue to highlight a villain, and Atticus is probably the best character in this whole thing, even though he's very maniacal and wants to just kill and destroy everything for no real reason other than he's just a bad person. But he is established as a credible threat, and we can see the scope of the Empire's power. This helped define the overall narrative, but it could have been better. If you look at the prologue in Star Wars: A New Hope, The reason why that opening action scene works is because of two things. One, Darth Vader is something no one had seen before. He's iconic and menacing without being over the top. The second is because of Princess Leia. She makes a noble sacrifice. She saves the cat. She gives R2-D2 the plans and sends them away at her own peril to save the rebellion. And she plays an essential role in the rest of the movie once she comes back about a third of the way through. So if we look at The Dark Knight, that opens with a prologue that introduces you to the twisted mind of the Joker. It's clever, it's interesting, and we already have a sense of who Batman is because that's a sequel. The third thing I kind of found interesting was the balance of bleakness to hope. So I think this is where the second film, The Scargiver, did better than the first film. The Rotten Tomatoes score of the second film, Scargiver, the director's cut anyway, is much higher than the first one. And I think the reason for that is a couple things. One, the story structure is more straightforward. It's not this like video game quest to pick up new characters and then come back for an empty battle. But also because the first one is just so bleak. Other than a little dance sequence in the beginning, it's just relentless awfulness happening over and over. In fact, we have the same scene of Atticus, the villain, bashing somebody's brains in that he betrayed. It's the exact same scene. It happens 3 times, and I heard he actually cut a few more of those to keep it from being NC-17. How many times do we need to see the villain betray and kill somebody to show his evilness and awfulness? So you need to have some hope to balance out the bleakness. Now, in The Scargiver, he does this a little bit better. There is a lot of time to develop characters, their relationships. At least you care a little bit when Atticus comes down and starts to mow down the villagers. So as much as conflict makes stories, there's got to be a reason why that conflict is worth it. So I saved the best for last because this is one thing nobody can ever take away from Zack Snyder. He is a brilliant visual storyteller. Now his plotting and dialogue are indefensible, but God, can he tell a story with visuals? And I'm not talking about angles, I'm not talking about the slow-mo, I'm talking about all the story buried within the visuals of the movie. All the storytelling that isn't spoken but seen. One of the most interesting experiences I had was volunteering to be zombified by my cousin for a movie makeup class. My cousin is brilliant with all this creative stuff. She designs cakes, and she's great at making clothes and fashion, and she's great with makeup. So she wanted to try this movie class. So I sat down, and the first thing before we even began, the instructor said, every single bit of makeup that you put on needs to have a story. If I have a gash above my eye, my cousin was expected to explain that when I was still alive, I was ejected from a car that got into an accident, and that's where that gash came from. The hole in my cheek was a gunshot wound inflicted by a young boy named Larry who was defending his family. The scrape on my chin was from when I fell outside trying to get into a store. Every single bit of it need to have a story, and Zack Snyder does this brilliantly. You can tell there is a whole world in his head and behind everything that's going on. In Rebel Moon, the pictures do tell a story. So there's this plaque of teeth, which is one of my favorite visuals in the movie, and it shows that Atticus has been doing this a long time. There are a lot of teeth on this plaque. 2, it shows there's a quasi-religious element to it. 3, there's a picture of a young princess in the middle of the picture, which spurns a bunch of questions. Who is this? Who is he doing it for? Who is this princess? And is she as terrible or awful as he is? And there's tons of examples of this. The scars on the main characters, the patterns on the robots. And God, I wish he would just can some of the voiceover and give the audience credit, let them figure some of this out. If he let his visual storytelling just present mysteries, I think people would be a lot more intrigued. So overall, I don't think anybody can say Rebel Moon 1 and 2 are good movies. They're just not. But it's interesting to see the mistakes he made and how those can inform his storytelling going forward. And hopefully he learns from this, because I do think he's got a lot of brilliant stories to tell. He's just a little bit off. This is why everybody needs a good editor. Anytime you give somebody complete control, unless they're a complete genius, It usually doesn't work out. Many people are involved in telling a story. I have great editors, by the way. But thank you so much. That is my take on Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon Part 1 and 2, the director's cut. 6 hours.